Thus saith the Lord, For 3 transgressions of Moab, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because he burned the bones of the king of Edom into lime. But I will send a fire upon Moab, and it shall devour the palaces of Kerioth, and Moab shall die with tumult, with shouting, and with the sound of the trumpet. And I will cut off the judge from the midst thereof, and will slay all the princes thereof with him, saith the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, For 3 transgressions of Judah, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have despised the law of the Lord, and have not kept his commandments, and their lies caused them to err, after the which their fathers have walked. But I will send a fire upon Judah, and it shall devour the palaces of Jerusalem. Thus saith the Lord, For 3 transgressions of Israel, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they sold the righteous for silver, and the poor for a pair of shoes, that pant after the dust of the earth on the head of the poor, and turn aside the way of the meek. And a man and his father will go in unto the same maid, to profane my holy name. And they lay themselves down upon clothes laid to pledge by every altar, and they drink the wine of the condemned in the house of their God. Yet destroyed I the Amorite before them, whose height was like the height of the cedars, and he was strong as the oaks. Yet I destroyed his fruit from above, and his roots from beneath. Also I brought you up from the land of Egypt, and led you 40 years through the wilderness to possess the land of the Amorite. And I raised up of your sons for prophets, and of your young men for Nazirites. Is it not even thus, O ye children of Israel, saith the Lord? But ye gave the Nazirites wine to drink, and commanded the prophets, saying, Prophesy not. Behold, I am pressed under you, as a cart is pressed that is full of sheaves. Therefore the flight shall perish from the swift, and the strong shall not strengthen his force, neither shall the mighty deliver himself. Neither shall he stand that handleth the bow, and he that is swift of foot shall not deliver himself. Neither shall he that rideth the horse deliver himself. And he that is courageous among the mighty shall flee away naked in that day, saith the Lord.
Captives, and the expansion of the import of black Africans across the Sahara from around AD 1000. The number of people enslaved by Muslims has been a hotly debated topic, especially when the millions of Africans forced from their homelands are considered. With full control of a great part of Africa, the Arabs began to capture young boys and girls and took them to Egypt, where they were sold into slavery within Africa, or taken across the Indian Ocean to Indonesia, China, Southwest Asia, and India. By the 10th century, the demand for slaves from Africa to work as plantation hands, sex slaves, domestic maids, and slave warriors had increased greatly, so much so that an estimated number of 5,000 slaves were shipped out of Africa a year. The historian Paul Lovejoy estimates that some 9.85 million Africans were shipped out as slaves to Arabia, and in small numbers to the Indian subcontinent. Lovejoy breaks his figures down as follows. Between AD 650 and 1600, an average of 5,000 Africans were shipped out per annum by the Arabs. This makes a rough total of 7.25 million. Then, between 1600 and 1800, another 1.4 million Africans were shipped out by the Arabs. The 19th century represented the highest point of the Arabian trade, as 12,000 Africans were vehemently shipped out per annum. The total figure for the 19th century alone was 1.2 million slaves to Arabia. Some other historians estimate altogether that between AD 650 and 1900, 10 million to 20 million people were enslaved by Arab slave traders. Others believe that over 20 million enslaved Africans alone had been delivered through the trans-Saharan route alone to the Islamic world.
Zephaniah 2. Gather yourselves together, yea, gather together, O nation not desired. Before the decree bring forth, before the day pass as the chaff, before the fierce anger of the Lord come upon you, before the day of the Lord's anger come upon you. Seek ye the Lord, all ye meek of the earth, which have wrought his judgment. Seek righteousness, seek meekness, it may be ye shall be hid in the day of the Lord's anger. For Gaza shall be forsaken, and Ashkelon a desolation. They shall drive out Ashdod at the noonday, and Ekron shall be rooted up. Woe unto the inhabitants of the seacoast, the nation of the Cherethites. The word of the Lord is against you. O Canaan, the land of the Philistines, I will even destroy thee, that there shall be no inhabitant. And the seacoast shall be dwellings and cottages for shepherds, and folds for flocks. And the coast shall be for the remnant of the house of Judah. They shall feed thereupon. In the houses of Ashkelon shall they lie down in the evening. For the Lord their God shall visit them, and turn away their captivity. I've heard the reproach of Moab, and the revilings of the children of Ammon, whereby they have reproached my people, and magnified themselves against their border. Therefore as I live, saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, surely Moab shall be as Sodom, and the children of Ammon as Gomorrah, even the breeding of nettles and salt pits, and a perpetual desolation. The residue of my people shall spoil them, and the remnant of my people shall possess them. This shall they have for their pride, because they have reproached and magnified themselves against the people of the Lord of hosts. The Lord will be terrible unto them, for he will famish all the gods of the earth, and men shall worship him, every one from his place, even all the isles of the heathen. Ye Ethiopians also, ye shall be slain by my sword. And he will stretch out his hand against the north, and destroy Assyria, and will make Nineveh a desolation, and dry like a wilderness, and flocks shall lie down in the midst of her. All the beasts of the nations, both the cormorant and the bittern, shall lodge in the upper lintels of it. Their voice shall sing in the windows, desolation shall be in the thresholds, for he shall uncover the cedar work. This is the rejoicing city that dwelt carelessly, that said in her heart, I am, and there is none beside me. How is she become a desolation, a place for beasts to lie down in? Every one that passeth by her shall hiss.
Dr. John Alambella Azuma estimates in his 2001 book, The Legacy of Arab Islam in Africa, that over 80 million more black people died over that route. The Arab slave trade was so intense, bloody, merciless to say the least. The cruelty on African captives by the Arabs was beyond telling. Similar to the transatlantic slave trade, captured slaves were beaten to be weakened and chained together. However, captured victims in the sub-Saharan slave trade had to endure several weeks of walking through the desert, carrying loads for their new masters from West or East Africa, to where they were eventually sold in the slave markets: Cairo, Baghdad, Istanbul, Mecca, and other centers. These slaves played various roles in the economy of the Muslim world. They were used as servants, harem keepers, laborers in fields, mines, and hydraulic yards, and as cannon fodder in armies. In several of his detailed books about the slave trade, British explorer Henry Hamilton Johnston explains how several slaves died in the desert, while others who fell sick or were badly bruised and could not make it were brutally killed by their masters. David Livingstone, the British missionary, traveler, and explorer, was so upset by the way the Arabs treated their African slaves that he wrote back home in the year 1870. These were his words: "In less than I take to talk about it, these unfortunate creatures, 84 of them, wended their way into the village where we were. Some of them, the eldest, were women from 20 to 22 years of age, and there were youths from 18 to 19 years. But the large majority was made up of boys and girls from 7 years to 14 or 15 years of age. A more terrible scene than these men, women, and children I do not think I ever came across. To say that they were emaciated would not give you an idea of what human beings can undergo under certain circumstances. Each of them had his neck in a large forked stick weighing from 30 to 40 pounds and 5 or 6 feet long, cut with a fork at the end of it where the branches of a tree spread out. The women were tethered with bark thongs, which are of all things the most cruel to be tied with. Of course, the bark thongs are soft and supple when first stripped off the trees, but a few hours in the sun would make them about as hard as the iron round packing cases. The little children were fastened by thongs to their mothers. As we passed along the path through which these slaves had traveled, I was shown a spot in the bushes where a poor woman the day before, unable to keep up with the march and most likely to hinder it, was cut down by the axe of one of these slave drivers. We went on further and were shown a place where a child lay. It had been recently born, and its mother was unable to carry it from debility and exhaustion. So the slave trader had taken this little infant by its feet and dashed its brains out against one of the trees and thrown it in there. Such was the brutality meted out to the Africans by the Arabs. Looking at all this in a very factly honest manner, the totality of the unthinkable, horrid practices besetted upon a certain group of people. Historians agree that it is a mistake to equate the bare survival of Africa with cultural or social or economic stagnation, for the slave trade visited such panoply of tragically interconnected disasters into the lives of every African for centuries, so that they have worked their way into the very racial memory of the continent and its people, particularly females, that only with time and kindness can it be expunged from the psyche of Africa. The Arabs' treatment of black Africans can aptly be termed an African genocide. Arabs killed more Africans in transit, especially when crossing the Sahara Desert, than Europeans and Americans combined, and over more centuries, both before and after the years of the Atlantic slave trade. Arab Muslims began extracting millions of black African slaves centuries before Christian nations did. Arab slave traders removed slaves from Africa for about 13 centuries, compared to the 3 centuries of the Atlantic slave trade. African slaves transported by Arabs across the Sahara Desert died more often than slaves making the Middle Passage to the New World by ship. Slaves invariably died within 5 years if they worked in the Ottoman Empire's Sahara salt mines. Black Africans did not enjoy immunity to many of the diseases found in the Arab world, which also resulted in high death rates. In West Africa, the Arab slave trade encompassed a vast region from the Niger Valley to the Gulf of Guinea. This traffic followed the trans-Saharan roads. The crossing could last up to 3 months with a high mortality rate due to the dire conditions of the trip. Here is the testimony of the German explorer Gustav Nachtigall. The poor children of the black countries seemed to meet death here, at the last stage of a long, hopeless, and painful journey. The long journey accomplished with insufficient food and scarce water, the contrast between the rich natural resources and the humid atmosphere of their homeland, and the dry and anemic air of the desert, the fatigue and the privations imposed by their masters and by the circumstances in which they find themselves, all this has gradually ruined their young strengths. The memory of their homeland that has disappeared along the way, their fear of an unknown future, the endless journey under the blows, hunger, thirst, and deadly exhaustion have paralyzed their last faculties of resistance. If the poor creatures lack strength to get up and walk again, they are simply abandoned, and their minds slowly fade under the destructive effect of the rays of the sun, hunger, and thirst. According to the work of some historians, the Arab slave trade has affected more than 17 million people. In the Saharan region alone, more than 9 million African captives were deported and 2 million died on the roads. This despicable phenomenon was legitimized by Islam, as Christianity would later condone the transatlantic slave trade. For example, the Tunisian Arab historian Ibn Khaldun, from 1332 to 1406, wrote that the only peoples to accept slavery are the Negroes because of their lower degree of humanity, their place being closer to the animal stage. Another one, the Algerian Arab theologian Ahmed al-Wancharisi, from 1430/1431 to 1508, offered legal and religious recommendations. This, he said, "I have been asked about slaves from the land of Abyssinia who profess monotheism and accept the rules of the Holy Law. Is it legal or not to buy and sell them? If their conversion to Islam comes after the establishment of a property right on these slaves, then Islam does not demand liberation, because slavery was caused by unbelief. The state of servitude persists after the disappearance of unbelief because of its existence in the past."
Ultra fire cervicals.
Because of its existence in the past. The Arab slave trade was characterized by appalling violence, rape, and worst of all, castration of black male slaves. While African women and girls were targeted, captured, and deported by Arab slavers for use as sex slaves, the male captives were, on the other hand, pitilessly castrated to prevent them from reproducing and becoming a stock. Castration of male slaves became a habit among slave traders due to the fact that they were in higher demand, stronger, noted to work faster and more efficiently, and were not a threat to slave masters and owners who feared that their wives, concubines, and female slaves would have affairs with them. The suffering inflicted on the victims of castration was profound, encompassing physical and psychological trauma. Castration was done to boys between the ages of 9 and 12, as it was believed that they survived the process more than an adult or adolescent. Although very many did not survive the process, as they often died during or after the harrowing operation. Whites died more, so slavers concentrated more on blacks. This was the darkest chapter in history that highlights the extent to which humans were dehumanized and exploited for gain. Here's a more detailed insight into this practice. 1. Economic factors. One of the primary reasons for castrating male captives was economic. The exporting countries had good economic incentives to castrate male slaves before they were shipped off. In the medieval slaving industry that was designed for exporting Slavic prisoners of war to the Arab world, castrating the slaves was an integral part of the process. Castration was then performed in the famous castration houses in Venice. Eunuchs, or castrated male slaves, were highly sought after due to their perceived trustworthiness and reliability. Eunuchs were considered valuable commodities in Arab societies, thus fetching much higher prices in slave markets compared to non-castrated slaves. Their lack of reproductive capability meant that they could serve in positions of trust and authority without posing a threat to the owner's hereditary wealth and power. Eunuchs were often employed in sensitive positions such as harem guards, administrative posts, and as servants in elite households. They served in influential positions in the Abbasid Caliphate's administration, with some even rising to the rank of vizier. The economic incentives gained by slave traders from exporting black eunuchs to the Arab nations encouraged the practice of castration. In some cases, such as the Zanj Rebellion in the 9th century Iraq, castrated slaves were sought after to work in dangerous and demanding environments like salt mines. This practice had persisted for centuries in the Arab slave trade. As late as 1903, there were still 194 African eunuchs in service to the Ottoman ruling family. 2. Control and domination. Castration was employed by Arab slavers as a means of exerting control and dominance over their male captives. By removing their ability to procreate, the slavers aimed to eliminate any potential threats of rebellion or the establishment of rival lineages. Additionally, castration was intended to ensure that these slaves would remain solely devoted to their master's demands without the distractions of family or personal attachments. 3. Social dislocation. Enslaved males who were castrated were forcibly removed from their communities and families. This social dislocation had far-reaching consequences as it disrupted the social fabric of African societies and led to imbalanced gender ratios. In regions where castration was prevalent, such as East Africa and the Sudan, entire villages were affected as young men were captured and subjected to this brutal practice. Many eunuchs who served in the harem of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul remained in servitude for life, isolated from their African roots. Their roles as loyal servants or guards sometimes meant they were isolated from their own cultural backgrounds and communities for life. Young boys were captured and castrated so that when they grew up, they could serve as eunuchs in harems. This slave ship was photographed in 1896. This large group of young boys may have been destined for castration to serve as eunuchs. The slaves in the photograph were headed to a Muslim country well after the American Civil War. In fact, slavery in the United States was a good bit more humane than slavery in the Arab world. It was bloody for Africans, bloody beyond words. In some cases, African societies would engage in castration as a preemptive measure to protect their youth from being captured and castrated by Arab slave traders. This reflects the deep fear and trauma associated with this practice. 4. Psychological and physical trauma. Castration was itself a traumatic experience, both physically and psychologically, for those subjected to it. The surgery itself was often performed without anesthesia under crude and unhygienic conditions, leading to excruciating pain and a high risk of infection. Many African boys did not survive their castration surgery. 6 out of every 10 people who were mutilated died from their wounds in castration centers. This is a prime reason why there are not many communities of blacks living in the non-African Muslim world today, despite the millions of black African slaves who were sold into the Muslim world. Castration led to hormonal imbalances on survivors, affecting the physical development and health of victims. Without testosterone, eunuchs often suffered from various health issues such as decreased muscle mass.
48. Against Moab, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Woe unto Nebo, for it is spoiled. Kiriathaim is confounded and taken, Misgab is confounded and dismayed. There shall be no more praise of Moab. In Heshbon they have devised evil against it. Come, and let us cut it off from being a nation. Also thou shalt be cut down, O madman, the sword shall pursue thee. A voice of crying shall be from Horonaim, spoiling and great destruction. Moab is destroyed. Her little ones have caused a cry to be heard. For in the going up of Luhith, continual weeping shall go up. For in the going down of Horonaim, the enemies have heard a cry of destruction. Flee, save your lives, and be like the heath in the wilderness. For because thou hast trusted in thy works, and in thy treasures, thou shalt also be taken, and Chemosh shall go forth into captivity with his priests and his princes together. And the spoiler shall come upon every city, and no city shall escape. The valley also shall perish, and the plain shall be destroyed, as the Lord hath spoken. Give wings unto Moab, that it may flee and get away. For the cities thereof shall be desolate, without any to dwell therein. Cursed be he that doeth the work of the Lord deceitfully, and cursed be he that keepeth back his sword from blood. Moab hath been at ease from his youth, and he hath settled on his lees, and hath not been emptied from vessel to vessel, neither hath he gone into captivity. Therefore his taste remained in him, and his scent is not changed. Therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will send unto him wanderers that shall cause him to wander, and shall empty his vessels, and break their bottles. And Moab shall be ashamed of Chemosh, as the house of Israel was ashamed of Bethel their confidence. How say ye, we are mighty and strong men for the war? Moab is spoiled, and gone up out of her cities, and his chosen young men are gone down to the slaughter, saith the King, whose name is the Lord of hosts. The calamity of Moab is near to come, and his affliction hasteth fast. All ye that are about him bemoan him, and all ye that know his name say, How is the strong staff broken, and the beautiful rod? Thou daughter that dost inhabit Dibon, come down from thy glory, and sit in thirst. For the spoiler of Moab shall come upon thee, and he shall destroy thy strongholds. O inhabitant of Aroer, stand by the way, and espy, ask him that fleeth, and her that escapeth, and say, What is done? Moab is confounded, for it is broken down. Howl and cry. Tell ye it in Arnon, that Moab is spoiled. And judgment is come upon the plain country, upon Holon, and upon Jahazah, and upon Mephath, and upon Dibon, and upon Nebo, and upon Beth-Diblathaim, and upon Kiriathaim, and upon Beth-Gamul, and upon Beth-Meon, and upon Kirioth, and upon Bozrah, and upon all the cities of the land of Moab, far or near. The horn of Moab is cut off, and his arm is broken, saith the Lord. Make ye him drunken, for he magnified himself against the Lord. Moab also shall wallow in his vomit, and he also shall be in derision. For was not Israel a derision unto thee? Was he found among thieves? For since thou spakest of him, thou skippedst for joy. O ye that dwell in Moab, leave the cities, and dwell in the rock, and be like the dove that maketh her nest in the sides of the hole's mouth. We have heard the pride of Moab. He is exceeding proud. His loftiness, and his arrogancy, and his pride, and the haughtiness of his heart. I know his wrath, saith the Lord, but it shall not be so. His lies shall not so affect it. Therefore will I howl for Moab, and I will cry out for all Moab. Mine heart shall mourn for the men of Kir-Heres. O vine of Sibmah, I will weep for thee with the weeping of Jazer. Thy plants are gone over the sea. They reach even to the sea of Jazer. The spoiler is fallen upon thy summer fruits and upon thy vintage. And joy and gladness is taken from the plentiful field, and from the land of Moab. And I have caused wine to fail from the winepresses. None shall tread with shouting. Their shouting shall be no shouting. From the cry of Heshbon, even unto Elealeh, and even unto Jahaz, have they uttered their voice, from Zoar even unto Horonaim, as an heifer of 3 years old. For the waters also of Nimrim shall be desolate. Moreover, I will cause to cease in Moab, saith the Lord, him that offereth in the high places, and him that burneth incense to his gods. Therefore mine heart shall sound for Moab like pipes, and mine heart shall sound like pipes for the men of Kir-Hares, because the riches that he hath gotten are perished. For every head shall be bald, and every beard clipped, upon all the hands shall be cuttings, and upon the loins sackcloth. There shall be lamentation generally upon all the housetops of Moab, and in the streets thereof. For I have broken Moab like a vessel wherein is no pleasure, saith the Lord. They shall howl, saying, How is it broken down? How hath Moab turned the back with shame? So shall Moab be a derision and a dismaying to all them about him. For thus saith the Lord, Behold, he shall fly as an eagle, and shall spread his wings over Moab. Kerioth is taken, and the strongholds are surprised. And the mighty men's hearts in Moab at that day shall be as the heart of a woman in her pangs. And Moab shall be destroyed from being a people, because he hath magnified himself against the Lord. Fear, and the pit, and the snare shall be upon thee, O inhabitant of Moab, saith the Lord. He that fleeth from the fear shall fall into the pit, and he that getteth up out of the pit shall be taken in the snare. For I will bring upon it, even upon Moab, the year of their visitation, saith the Lord. They that fled stood under the shadow of Heshbon because of the force. But a fire shall come forth out of Heshbon, and a flame from the midst of Sion, and shall devour the corner of Moab, and the crown of the head of the tumultuous ones. Woe be unto thee, O Moab! The people of Chemosh perisheth, for thy sons are taken captives, and thy daughters captives. Yet will I bring again the captivity of Moab in the latter days, saith the Lord. Thus far is the judgment of Moab.